I'm near the cannabis company. They produce various products derived from the marijuana plant, and it's been a couple of years constructing that thing, and it seems like they're getting ready to actually produce something. Anyway, it's interesting because I can actually smell uh, the cannabis now. So it seems like they have something in there that they're going to start working with to make oils and gummies or whatever the heck they're making. Pharmaceuticals, who knows? So, hello. Um, I'm writing again. We had a bit of a hurricane-esque kind of storm that hit Europe, north of where I am. And down here in the Lisbon Leiria area, we had quite a bit of rain and wind for a while, but it wasn't really terrible. So it's really clean and fresh now. The sun's back out. It's about 18 degrees Celsius, very comfortable weather for a bike ride. And this morning when I woke up, I was listening to a Jim Rutt Show podcast, as I do. I'm not a huge fan of any intellectual influencers really anymore because I've gotten over all of them. They all have their foibles and, quirks and biases and so on and so forth. So you listen to them with a grain of salt, and the ones I like talk to interesting people, so I usually look at their show to see if anybody interesting is on or somebody I don't know, haven't heard of, that sounds interesting in the description, and then I'll go ahead and listen to it, and if it's interesting, I'll listen to the whole thing. So he was talking to some libertarian guy, uh, you know, um, his name's Cliff. I don't have the full name here on my phone, but it inspired me to write something on my Medium and my Substack and my blog. I don't write that often. I'm kind of inconsistent, but sometimes something gets me, and it's usually in the morning when I wake up. And then I do that, and I hope it's not a total waste of time. I do it just to work my thoughts out for myself. There are all kinds of people. We talk as if we know things. So most of us, if we think we're smart and intelligent, we talk very emphatically about what we want to talk about as if we're experts. So when you're younger and you're studying philosophy or something, you want to talk about philosophy even though you know that you're not that well trained and haven't read that much. So you want to talk with your friends about Schopenhauer or something, or if you're learning photography, you want to talk to somebody about depth of field or electronic shutter versus mechanical shutter or something, composition, rule of thirds, because you just want to work it out in your head, and conversation is a good way to do that. And sometimes we go overboard and we act like we know more than we do, or we want to project that we know more than we do. Some people are very good at being humble about, what they think they know. And of course, what we think we know is always just a fraction of what can be known, even if we're experts. But anyway, in this thing, I said reality is an extensive set, as in a set of things, and hard to get one's educated mind around. So the more educated and intelligent you are, the more prone you are really to the common logical fallacies and biases and other things that we think we're immune to because we're smart, or we have an education, or we've read a lot of books or something like that. And we kind of forget that we are also ideologically programmed with various cultural algorithms and memes and ideologies and whatnot. We don't really appreciate that. It's very difficult to interrogate one's own thinking. So anyway, I said the problem with their thinking have to do with, and I made a list here. I won't read the whole thing. You can read it. I'll put a link if you want to read it. But one, being mindful of the framing of things. So, how do you frame a thing? This is so important for everything because in language and social science, they often, uh, you know, prime people with certain things. So if you prime someone talking about religion with, you know, the Beatitudes of Jesus as opposed to the Punisher Bible thing, you know, you'll get a different frame of reference in their responses, things like that. So framing is huge, obviously, and the other one is a misunderstanding or ignorance of context. So we might think we understand context, but we don't. Maybe we understand the context of a war or a conflict in terms of what we've seen on the news or in terms of how it affects us personally or who knows. But we don't really have a deep understanding of the context. So you might think that everybody who's sympathetic with Palestinians is a Hamas terrorist or something, or you know, somehow anti-Semitic or whatever. But you know, it's actually, if you think about it more deeply, it's more complex than that, or complicated than that. So a lot goes into understanding context, right? Causality errors, we all know there are tons of those, and we make them all the time, no matter how smart you are, intelligent you are, educated you are, how many things you've done, how many businesses you've run, and so on, how curious you are, what kind of an autodidact you are, how many advanced degrees you have. We're all vulnerable to that. There's plenty to argue with Steven Pinker about, even though he's a really intelligent and decent guy. Systems thinking errors, stocks and flows, feedback loops, and other things like that. And smart people always claim to be systems thinkers or complexity, interested in complexity science. Complexity science is complex. So, you know, how expert are they in these things, and how do they apply them in terms of frames and biases and other things that I just said when they're thinking about them. Hubristic assumptions, right? You think you're really smart, you're hubristic, you're confident, and so you make assumptions based on this confidence. And basic assumptions, people who understand business management understand financial assumptions. You know, what am I assuming about the prices and the markets, and how easy it is to get inputs and hire people and whatever. And if those assumptions are off, just like assuming an asteroid, you know, is going a certain thing, and you know, a butterfly in the universe bumps into it, knocks it a millimeter off course, and then after so many years it hits the earth or whatever. You know, you're making assumptions all the time, and basic assumptions can be very wrong. So it's not that easy to calibrate and formulate your assumptions. Stubborn ideological adherence, you know, just my beliefs are better than yours type thing. And so you're going to cherry pick any ideas or evidences or whatever based on your beliefs, and you're going to be stubborn about that because your identity is wound up in it and other things. So it's very hard to let that go. Beliefs, the true believer syndrome. And what I mean by that is, you know, we're all true believers in something. And once we believe, it feels good to believe, and questioning our beliefs feels bad. Cognitive dissonance and other things like that can happen. And, you know, it's just like, hey, look, I don't want to argue about it. I learned this from my grandfather, and that's that. Okay, so just, you know, here in our country, we do it this way. Not just things you do, but things you believe in, right? The emperor is God type of thing. 9, ignoring the forest for the trees. This is something everybody does. Nature is a very complex system of systems, layer after layer. Biology is complex, biospheres, ecology, all these things. And, you know, parsing all of that is not easy. Experts in various domains studying nature, they spend lifetimes trying to figure out even small bits and pieces of the forest. And we're obsessed with the trees, or conforming the forest into a nice garden that conforms to our aesthetic preferences or something. So not listening to or being mindful of big nature, and I say big nature like big business, big pharma. The natural sciences, of course, the natural sciences, right? Chemistry and empiricism and evidence-based and all of this kind of stuff about how nature works and our best guess theories of the moment that are always being updated and changing as we learn more and gain better tools for understanding and so on and so forth. Of course, all intelligent men believe that they do this. Naturally, they do. Why wouldn't they? They're natural science people, they're evidence-based people. That's why they can speak emphatically about their opinions on genocide or something. And when you get into social science, it's even more complex because then all these ideological belief systems just come into play and it messes everything up. So it's nowhere near as empirical and evidence-based, rigorously speaking, as the natural sciences would be, a domain in the natural sciences. 11, a blindness to seeing the contradictions in their mental models. So we all have contradictions. And if we're critical of our own thinking, or we have a self-examined life, or whatever you want to think about it, we'll notice contradictions in the way we think and in our own mental models, and we can be honest about it or not. We can run and hide from it if it doesn't feel good or not. So emphatic speech, lots of times that's a red flag for me. He's going on and on about how, it's just like, Iraq crossed the border and we kicked their ass. Well, why wouldn't America be able to kick Iraq's ass? There's a big difference between those two powers at the time, right? Their resources, oh my God, and you kick their ass. Oh boy, that's great, wonderful. Because they, went against a norm of geopolitics or whatever. Audience capture, that's a thing. You start performing for your audience because that's the way you make your living. That's the way you get clicks and likes. That's the way you get attention. You don't want to mess with that. And the more feedback you get from the audience, liking a certain aspect of what you're saying, the more you veer off into that direction naturally. You just do it without thinking about it. And that includes bad incentives, right? You're not going to argue with your pocketbook. If you're making money, you're not going to argue against that. But bad incentives include all kinds of things, right? It's many layers of things can be encompass bad incentives. Groupthink and motivated reasoning, that's huge. Posturing to maintain status. So there's 15 points there. And then I go on and elaborate on some of the stuff that just kind of hit me when I was listening to the podcast. One thing that always rubs me wrong is, he broke the norm, or it's your fault, pointing fingers, without exploring the reasons why one would want to do something so costly. Why is the norm the norm? Groups of people usually have good reasons for doing things. It's a fatal flaw not to explore those reasons carefully and open-mindedly. When you blame somebody for something, there are complex suites of action-reaction going on before things escalate to something we might notice and then judge as right or wrong. Anyway, I'm going to stop here. But I'll put a link. I called it Perusing the Modern Techno-Industrial Pathologies of Intelligent Men. You can read it if you want to. So I'm sitting here by this old font near Benedita, and it's really beautiful here. I'm going to ride up to the football pitch and then home and then continue work on my writing. So I'm working on a series I want to pitch. If you can't change the world, you might as well write a fucking TV series, at least entertain people. There was a time before, Sopranos or The Wire or even The West Wing or things like that, where people couldn't imagine a series like that. The Bear is a very interesting series. It's poetical, it's emotional, it's intense. The characters are deep. The exploration of the characters is deep. And it rubs people the wrong way, but they watch it anyway, and they wonder, can they continue watching for a fourth season, or would it be too much, or maybe I'm into these characters now. So culture shifts quickly and dramatically. We hardly notice it, but it does. And then pretty soon we're paying attention to different stuff, right? We're the intellectual dark web, what a fucking joke, the Four Horsemen, what a goddamn joke. Just read Dawkins' books if you're interested. But for a while they're very salient and interesting, and we get excited about them. And then the culture shifts. I saw this video about the Led Zeppelin guys were talking to an interviewer in BBC. He was going, well, you can't just whistle one of your tunes and it, gets catchy and you're whistling it while you're walking around the street. And they were nice guys, musicians, artists, and they were just saying, well, things have shifted, and I think the audience is interested in this stuff now. I can't explain it, but it seems like they are. So, why do you go from the Beatles to Led Zeppelin, right? Why do you go from Led Zeppelin to grunge? Where does that all come from? Punk rock, mosh pits, where did that come from? And we can forget just how quickly culture changes. And then in the zeitgeist, there's an interest in something. If you catch it at the right time, you might get lucky as a creator and actually do something fairly new and interesting. I'm not saying I've hit on a formula. I don't know. I'll punt it. It probably won't amount to anything, but I'll go home and do that work. So I hope you guys are all good. The few people who watch this, or anybody who pops by accident and sees it. Yeah, it's nice if you comment or subscribe or whatever, or hate me. It's all good. But I don't expect much. I'm not trying that hard to be noticed. So if you watch this, thanks a lot. It's nice to spend some time with you and have a really wonderful weekend. It's coming up soon, and I hope the Floridians are okay. People talk about a once-in-a-century type storm. No, these category whatever storms are going to continue to be big and scary and devastating. And there are going to be more of them. That's just a fact of nature because of the way the atmosphere works and our chemical inputs affect things and whatnot. And we can't run and hide from that with ideology or belief systems. Nature's going to do what nature's going to do, and you might not be able to insure for it, and you might not be able to rebuild. There might not be enough resources left over at some time to put the diesel fuel in the tractors and the cranes and electrify everything by pulling minerals out of the earth using fossil fuels and then transforming them using what? Geothermal or something energy into big machines. Things are going to shift, and you'll hardly notice, and then there'll be a big bump, and it'll be scary and dangerous, and you may or may not be prepared for it mentally, psychologically, emotionally, intellectually, but it's going to happen. And if you're lucky, if you're weird and lucky, we're born in the right place at the right time, great, good for you. Other people are suffering, and it's mind-boggling to me that people don't understand that and can't have empathy and compassion for people in that situation. This whole idea of going to war with Taiwan and all this stuff, and if it takes 20 years to weaken Russia, is a good investment. That's just fucking absurd, because we really can't afford to spend our resources on war in the 20th century. We've got bigger challenges to deal with that are also costly require a lot of inputs and financing and so on, and commitment and collaboration and cohesion and all that kind of thing. Creativity, innovation. So fuck it. We got to start putting our energy into things that really make a difference and forget about thinking whether Trump's going to ruin the world or Kamala Harris is going to ruin the world. These people are two sides of the same coin in my point of view. And what comes next in 2025 and 6 and 7 is business as usual. So that's fairly predictable. And I predict we're not going to have any really innovative, interesting leaders. And if somebody really is a Prince of Peace, they'll probably get assassinated. So what a tragedy. But isn't that the way it goes? It seems to go. You don't know what you got till it's gone. Paved paradise, put up a parking lot. Cheers. Buliamti out.